This past summer, my dad's older brother, Ted, passed away. He was only in his early 70s, but he had struggled with health issues the last few years. But even so, his death came as a surprise. I didn't know him very well, perhaps only seeing him twice in the last 10 years or so. Ted lived in Portland, where he taught ceramics at Lewis and Clark College for 25 years. He was known in the family as an intellectual, an artist, and the summer caretaker of a family ranch in southern Wyoming, which always seemed in perpetual need of repair. He and my dad had several things in common. Along with their other three siblings, they were raised in a deeply conservative and religious home, children of a stern Lutheran minister. They grew up out west, bouncing from church to church in the Dakotas, Nebraska, Wyoming. But my dad and Ted grew up to be the two liberals in the family, and the first in the long family history to leave the church. Ted for good, my dad for Unitarian Universalism. When I saw Ted, he would often speak negatively about where he came from. He was more direct, less interested in getting along than my dad was, comfortable saying exactly what he thought. Whether it was about the typical small-town cuisine that he felt was lacking, or the way that people voted in his hometowns, or the kind of prayer that they did in his family's church, he had grown into a kind of professorial curmudgeon. And so I was surprised, given his willingness to critique where he came from, that after he died, he wanted to be buried in a place called Wilcox, Nebraska. The location did not seem very Ted. Ted never lived there, or to my knowledge, lived anywhere near Wilcox, Nebraska. Wilcox was simply where his mother, my grandmother, grew up. I'd only been to Wilcox once before, and when I heard that Ted had died, I wanted to go to his funeral. Being out east, I rarely got to go out west. I rarely got to see my family history, where they came from, and I thought it would be a good chance for me to reconnect to the places and the people where I came from, that biological and cultural DNA that made me and makes me who I am. So my fiance and I flew out from LaGuardia to Omaha, and the next day drove the hours to Wilcox, all the way west past Lincoln. To get there, you have to go off the interstate and drive down miles of country roads, mostly paved, taking various turns so that you get lost. You don't know what sense of direction you have. You are surrounded by corn. It's very flat. And it's hard to see anything but the sky, which is vast. When you arrive in Wilcox, it feels like you're entering an outpost of civilization, a place removed from time. There are only roughly 350 people who live there. Many of them may be actual farmers who live in the community. No stoplights, no highway, no general store. It is still and quiet, the kind of place that living in a city like this, it's easy to forget that it does not still exist. The service, Ted's funeral, took place at my grandmother's old home church. Those who gathered were all family, most of whom I had never met before. Second cousins, great aunts and uncles, and other people whose family relationship was so convoluted and complex that no term seems to describe how exactly we're related. The reception afterwards offered a chance to talk with one another. Several people, befitting the place, wore overalls. Others were in cowboy hats. One was still nursing a shoulder that was kicked by a horse the week before. Another was adamant that we visit his gun shop in town, the big city, not Wilcox. Everyone was curious about this place called New York, which to them seemed like a magical, far-off place One person wondered out loud how amazing it must be to live up so high in the air. When you lived in a place so flat, they said they had never been 3 stories above. There were obvious cultural differences between my family and us, from the attire that they wore to their points of reference, to the bright green marshmallow salad that was served. Which you laugh, but it was good. I went back for seconds. I don't regret it. Our conversations weren't always easy or comfortable. At least one sentence started with a disclaimer like, "Now this might not be PC," and those sentences never end well. But the majority of conversations and interactions were positive. After the reception, we drove to the cemetery. Like everything else, it was surrounded on all sides by corn. When we got there, my uncle started showing us around. They showed us the graves of my great-great-grandparents. They showed us the grave of my grandmother and her siblings. They showed us the graves of other families who were connected to us in some way far back. The Bartels, the Tichtemeyers, the Heidemans, all of whom had lived and died near Wilcox, Nebraska, and some of whom descendants were with us that day. I learned that in addition to Ted, another uncle had just bought a plot for himself and his wife. He even bought a few others to share, which he offered to my dad and me, and anyone else there who might want one. As I stood there, it struck me how peculiar it was on that day that before visiting Wilcox that second time, I had very little idea all the family history that existed in that place. Now, I knew I had family there. Of course, in a nebulous, you have family in Nebraska kind of way. But I didn't know just how concentrated it was. I didn't know that we had a cemetery full of our people, where a good majority of our family, going back generations after generations, was buried and would be buried. I didn't expect all these people who I'd never met to show ownership over Ted, someone they'd never met or just heard of, but we're all there in numbers. It felt like I was discovering a whole new family, a whole family history, an ancestral home that I never knew was there. I always thought that my family was scattered. They had moved from place to place, here and there, unattached. Some people have tight, extended family. That was never us. It was a revelation that there was a place and a group of people that existed both in the past but was still here and alive in the present. A place for me and our family, a place that had existed for generations, and that would continue to be us if we wanted it in the future. I am not planning yet to buy a burial plot in Wilcox. At least not yet. It is too soon for that. But I like that I could. I like that there was a place for me if I wanted it. Not just to be buried, but to belong. That could be uniquely mine and my family's. A home that, despite all the movement that we've had, all the people we know, connects us to a place and a people, to something timeless and something deeper. Like many of us, this connection to people and place is something that I have missed out in my life. Even just being here in New York, so many of us come from some other place. We have left or been forced to leave the places of our ancestors, the places we were raised, the places that we might call home. Even for those of us who are here, we know that the city changes so rapidly. It's inundated by outsiders, and the city seems to care so little for sentiment and tradition and the past. It's always growing and building higher. Neighborhoods are changing. It's easy to feel adrift and apart from our roots. to feel as if we are people without a history. Now, Ted's decision to be buried in Wilcox was his way of making peace with where he came from, with his mother, his family, and that part of him that yearned to return home and find a home in the world, a home that maybe he couldn't find while alive. Returning to that home, that place that he never even lived. It wasn't about nostalgia or misplaced hope, but was him tapping into a feeling of rootedness that he couldn't feel alone. I think we all need ancestors. We all need ancestors to feel whole, to feel that we aren't alone in this world and adrift, to feel that we're part of something vast and yet intimate, a community that we may never have met, yet still are our own and still cares about us. Ancestors assure us that we belong in a world that is often so trying and difficult and confusing and complicated. Ancestors teach us about ourselves, that we do not come from nothing. They make us feel at awe at being rooted to something deep and beyond our understanding. Now, Ted had many complicated feelings about his ancestors, his family, and his upbringing. And he's not unique, and I bet many of us do too. But that shouldn't keep us from embracing those of our ancestors who are worthy of devotion. Or if there are none that we can think of, we can assume that going further enough back, there must be someone out there, nameless even, who we can connect to and feel like is our own. Ted's choice to return home was not just about joyful homecoming, but about reconciliation, forgiveness, and finding peace in death, even if it wasn't always easy in life. Ted has joined the ranks of those ancestors now too. He lies in that quiet cemetery, far from here, far from Portland where he lived, far from anyone he knew in life. But he rests alongside family who came before him, for me, or many people who are even alive today. He is, as the eldest brother, the first of his generation to make this choice. So on this Remembrance Sunday, this is the time to think about your ancestors. Think about what a homecoming might be for you. How do you return to those places, those people who came before? How do they live within you still, whether they are your parents who you knew, whether they are generations back? How do you love them, reconcile with them, forgive them? How do they give you strength, teach you about yourself, make you feel less alone when you feel so far away from home? How do they make you feel whole? I hope that you let yourself feel their power, their presence. I hope you will let yourself imagine all the pride and love that they are sending you, how much joy they have for what you have done in your life, for you, maybe your children. That even though that they are gone, their spirit lives in you. That their memory give you courage and confidence and hope. I don't know the next time that I will be back in Wilcox, Nebraska, this newfound ancestral home that we have. It probably won't be until another relative joins the ancestors and we gather once again. But it is important, I think, that no matter where we are, no matter who we are, that we return to our ancestors now and again, even if that's just in here, even if that's just imagining who they are, imagining these loving people who look down at us with the best possible tenderness, wishing us well, believing in us, reminding us that we are not alone. This gift of the ancestors is priceless, and it is always there for us if we want it, if we remember them. We are all children of those who came before. May we let them bring us closer to home. Amen.